What's going on, everybody? Cheers and happy Wednesday, and welcome to the With Her Two Hands podcast, where each week we celebrate the women who build, fix, and make the things that make the world go round with her own two hands. I am your host, Bogey, and tonight I am excited to have a guest on where we are going to be talking about a very important topic, and that is work-life balance, particularly when it comes to being a mom and having a job or career in the trades. Now, across the United States, across all industries, work-life balance is a challenge. We know this. This is not a new topic. Being a mom in just about any industry has its challenges because we have not a great distribution of labor across genders when it comes to family care and parenting duties. That's changing slowly, but it's still, it is what it is. So this is across all industries, but I find in the trades it's a particular challenge because we don't do a lot of time off. And when you do take time off, you get punished for taking time off. So there's some unique challenges within these industries that are particularly conservative in their gender role ideals. And so being a woman in these fields can be challenging. Being a mom in these fields, extra challenging. So tonight we have on a guest who came to the trades a little bit later in her life. She was older than most of the students in trade school. She was still young, but a little bit later in her life, and pursued her passion and has struggled to follow her passion and her dreams while balancing all of the rest of the things. So I'm really excited to have her on. Really quickly before we invite her, I do want to thank our sponsor for tonight's episode is Drive Time. They've been a partner for this podcast series for many years now. And they do a ton of great work behind the scenes, supporting women in the trades and folks in the trades in general, helping them along their way in their career path and helping them find their home within the automotive industry. And they are well known as a used car dealer, but they also refurbish all of those cars. So if you're looking for a new car or you're looking for a new place to call your home as a career, definitely go check them out. I'll have a link in the description down below. Most importantly, I want to thank you guys. The goal here with the With Her Two Hands podcast is that one day this is not necessary, that we are all just tradespeople, that we're all just human beings who happen to be female and who happen to work in the trades, that it's not necessary to put the gender qualifier. Right now, we are a minority, less than 10% across all trades, less than 2% within the automotive trades. So by far the minority, this is still a necessity to celebrate and shine a light on the incredible women who are making waves within the industry. But you guys are all a part of normalizing this, part of the change to hopefully one day make this unnecessary. So thank you guys for being along on this journey, normalizing women in the trades. Make sure that if you like this series, that you hit like, hit subscribe, share this with your friends. If you know a woman who you think should be on this series, make sure you let me know about her. We'd love to have her on. And if you have a particular topic you'd love for us to cover, let us know as well, either in the comments or shoot us a message. And with that, I'm going to quit my blabbing and bring on the amazing Miss Dezire. And I already forgot how to pronounce your last name because I'm awful. Pronounce your last name for me.
Grafton.
Grafton. That should be simple. Why am I having difficulty with that? Dezire Grafton, otherwise mostly known as Des. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the series. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a good thing you didn't have to use my maiden name. My maiden name is way more difficult.
I think I have an easier time with the really challenging last names than I do with the easier last names. The easier ones always stump me for some reason. I don't know why. But tell us, in a nutshell, what your current position is, what your current job is, what you do, and then we'll dig back in time and start getting into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, so I work at Toyota as a maintenance technician. So I do pretty much, anything you would think of under that falls under getting a maintenance done on your car, whether that's an oil change, tire rotation, getting a battery replaced. I do a lot of inspections to help prevent any further damage to a car. If I see any leaks that are concerning, or if I think that a certain type of repair should be done, then I'll recommend that.
Awesome. Okay. And how long have you been with Toyota?
see, June, it'll be 2 years.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And was Toyota directly out of trade school for you, or was there some stops in between?
Yeah, Toyota was actually, I think, only 3 weeks after I was done with school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The service manager, it was actually a lot of different, service managers from all different dealerships and, like, smaller owned companies too, that came to our school, and we did what they called mock interviews.
Okay.
And they said that they're not allowed to hire us on the spot, but a lot of them like, slipped us business cards and said, "Here, email me," or, "We'd be really interested in hearing back from you." So, that was one of them. I got to have a mock interview with the service manager, and
Nice.
I've always loved the brand Toyota. I've had some friends work for this particular dealership, and they've really loved working for them, so that was my
Nice.
top choice. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's so true. Like I hear people all the time talk about like how do they pick a good place? And it's like, well, you know other human beings, right? Like like
Mhm,
meet other techs, find out they talk. They will talk and tell you which shops are the good shops to work at. So
mhm,
knowing that it was a decent shop to begin with is always a good starting point.
mhm.
So let's go back in time. Um, you did not originally set out to become a mechanic. This was not your childhood dream, correct?
No.
So how did this happen? What was your childhood dream? I'm curious. What did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
When I was really young, I wanted to be an astronaut, and then
Okay.
I think, like, a scientist too. I was really interested in just, like, really a lot of different things because I was also an artist, so I
Okay.
never really knew what I wanted to do. I just yeah, I kinda bounced around. I've always been interested in learning things, like, especially new things, whether it's working on cars or, any kind of new art medium. I just love learning new things. So, I don't know if there was ever anything that was like, "Yes, this is what I'm gonna do when I grow up." It just kinda happened.
Okay. So what were you doing at the time before you made the switch into going to tech school? Was it just as, random jobs to keep you busy, or what
Yeah,
were you down a
actually,
path?
I was going to art school in California,
Oh,
and then I got married, and, but while I was in art school, I was cleaning houses
okay.
and did that for, like, a couple of years. I really liked it. I love making things clean, and, yeah, that was probably one of my favorite jobs next to working on cars. And so when I moved from California to Oregon, I kinda just kept that same job just with a different company, and I really liked it. Just cleaning houses makes people happy, and yeah, from there, I had my first son, and, um, my dad was in the military, so I had so many opportunities of, like, well, I could keep this job, but I had to stop it for a little while I was pregnant with my first son because I was just so sick. So that's
Mm,
kind of where that ended. I guess it ended even later actually when he was, I think, around 6 months old. I just decided that I needed something that was a little bit more. I wanted to be with people. I was by myself cleaning, and I
mm,
just wanted to be with people more, so I kind of bounced around with other jobs with, working at a bar. I was a bartender, and then I was, like, worked at a counter, kinda not really a waitress, kinda like a waitress slash hostess, so that way I had that interaction with people. I really enjoyed that. Um, but I think the main reason why I went into this industry and this trade was I've always had the interest, and then with my dad being in the military, he there were opportunities for me to go to school and get paid for it.
mm.
So, and he's a disabled vet, so there were even more opportunities to be able to get free education and get paid to go to school, and I was like, "Well, why
Nice.
wouldn't I use that opportunity?"
Yeah,
And automotive
absolutely.
is the one that I landed on because 'cause I've heard such good things about the program that I went through, and yeah, it was free, and I was thinking, "Well, I'd love to be able to learn about this stuff."
Why automotive? So you'd heard good things about the program, but what about automotive attracted you? Were you into cars? Were you interested in that previously, or was this like just on a total whim?
So, I've always wanted, like, as a kid, I was always anytime I saw, like, a cool car drive by, it would always catch my eye. Particularly Japanese-made cars, but really anything that I thought was just built well. And I think that's the artist in me, is that like I can appreciate
Mm.
when somebody has built something that's really like amazing. And so it's always caught my eye. Even like when I was younger, it was actually old school cars too, like the Volkswagen, vans and the Rabbits, and like old school cars would always attract me more. And then as I got older, and because I lived in Japan for 8 years, you see a lot of the really cool like slammed Japanese cars, and those ones caught my eye. So I think that because I wanted someday to own something like that, I knew that in order to have something like that, you either have to have a lot of money, or you have to know how to work on that stuff yourself, or you have to know the right people to do it for really, really cheap. And so I thought, well, I'd love to be able to learn how to do that stuff myself so I don't have to rely on somebody else. And then I could, have a car that I really want to have.
I love it. So
Hmm.
hold up for a second. When did you live in Japan? How old were you? That's a huge, like, you just
I,
slid that in there.
I know there's like a lot of little tiny pieces to all of this. So
I love
uh,
it.
I moved to Japan when I was 10. Like I said, my dad was in the military, so he was in the Air Force for 20 years. And when I was 10 years old, we moved to Japan, and then I lived there for 8 years.
Okay.
Hmm.
And that's where the love affair with Japanese cars began.
I feel like I had an appreciation for them, but I really didn't know like anything about cars. I didn't know the difference between the crankshaft and camshaft. I didn't know like literally anything. I didn't know what a rotary engine was. I didn't know anything at all. Like I think my
Yeah.
dad taught me how to maybe change a tire, and that was about it. But I had that appreciation. I don't think it really blossomed actually until I moved to the states, which is kind of like, I feel like backwards. A lot of people think that I got it from Japan because of how cool everything is there, but actually here in
Interesting.
Oregon, because of some friends that I made.
Okay.
I had a really crappy car that I bought that I liked and thought was cool. It was a 1987 Nissan 200 SX,
Okay.
and it's a lot of fun and really cool. And I had a lot of people that it turned people's heads when they saw it because it's not a very popular. I mean, like people were like, "What is that? It almost looks like an 86, but it also kind of looks like a Supra. What is that?" Nissan. And so I had that car, and I actually met people through having it just by parking it downtown. People would come up to
Yeah.
me and, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And then we became friends. So it was really through that I made friends who knew how to work on their own cars and who drifted at Pat's Acres Racing Complex and
Okay.
who have wrenched on their own stuff. And so because of those friends, I was able to learn from them.
I love it. Well, it's kind of like a ripple effect, right? Like you had the appreciation for the cars, and then that led to getting one, which led to
Mhm.
meeting people, which opens the doors, right? Like there's so many times that like we just don't know what options are available to us until the doors have already started to open, and that's when they started to open for you was having that car. So that's really cool. And then you got a
Mhm.
Supra somewhere along the way, right?
Yeah, it was one of those friends was
Okay.
moving to Japan to become a English teacher.
Oh,
And because he went to Willamette University, I believe. It was a university here in Salem, and he was moving to Japan to teach English, and he had a Supra that he used to drift, but something was wrong with the transmission, and so he was selling it for super cheap and just trying to get rid of it. And he said that if we bought it off of him, that he would actually help us fix it before he left. And
nice.
so we fixed it in my parents' garage here. And yeah, that was the first time I'd ever really like wrenched on my own car or even anyone else's car. And it was a lot of fun. We dropped the transmission. My dad helped us put it back in. And
Nice.
yeah, it was a lot
Were
of fun.
you were not in school yet at that point, right? You'd not made the
No, I
decision to
think
start school?
that's kind
Okay.
of what piqued my interest in going to school though, because we
Yeah.
could only learn so much from YouTube and like
Sure.
other people. And I thought, "Oh, I'd really love to, like, have some professional training in this." We actually didn't torque the flywheel properly because I didn't even know what torquing meant. Like, I knew what it meant, but I didn't know the importance of it, which sounds very bad, but I
No,
had no former or professional education. I knew, like, if you don't tighten down the wheels tight enough, they're gonna fly off, which actually happened to me one time, but not because I didn't tighten it enough. It was I thought my husband tightened it. He thought I tightened it, and we drove down the road, and there goes the wheel on that
That's
Supra too.
scary.
So yeah,
That's terrifying.
anyway.
No, I appreciate your honesty. I mean, and you're not alone in that. Like I was in the same boat. I mean, it was Volkswagens that brought me to the game, not Toyotas, but it was a passion for a particular type of vehicle that got me into wanting to learn how to fix it for myself, that brought me to tech school knowing nothing. I didn't know the names of any tools. I didn't know anything. And I think um, it's so cool to hear that. And I think a lot of times, like, people get made fun of for not knowing things. And it's like, well, how are you supposed to know if you've never done it? Like, that's we all start out not knowing these things. But I appreciate you saying that, because it's important for other people to hear, like, even if you know nothing, you can still develop and have a successful career as an auto
Yeah,
mechanic.
it's all about the passion, I think. As long as you have,
Yeah.
as long as the passion is there, like the learning and stuff will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. So you start wrenching on this Supra. It ignites the spark, and you decide to go to this automotive program. What was school like for you?
So I actually started school in, it was 2019.
You
August of
sweet
2019 or September of 2019. And I made it in like just barely under 2 weeks, because 2 weeks is the cutoff when you can drop out without any consequences of any sort. I was
Okay.
pregnant at the time with my second son. I was 6 months pregnant. And I was like, I can still do it. I'm just going to make it happen. And I got up close to that 2 week deadline, and I thought, there's just no way. I had already bought all the tools. I had already bought the right shoes. I was all prepared for everything. And my husband knew, like, I just couldn't do it. It was too much standing. I was too sick. There was just no way. And I remember just crying to my professor and saying, I just really wanted to do this. And they were like, well, just come back. I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I guess I could. So in February, and then it was that following year in 2020 that everything was like, you had to use, it was Zoom that we were using. Yep, Zoom. And then we had labs, but we had to wear a mask. It somehow sort of worked out to have Zoom, because I was still able to stay home more with my baby and my older son too. So yeah, it worked out. It worked out to have it that way, but it was kind of like a weird, like, I was only in for 2 weeks and then I left. But when I came back, my professors actually, they all knew me. They remembered me. So it was kind of cool, like going back and being remembered instead of like just a newbie, even though I still was new in a different way. So yeah, it was a really good experience. Even when I went back, my professors were all super encouraging, and even my classmates too. And I was really shy and, like, I guess scared at first, because it's just a lot of new information. Like, just in a couple of months, we tore down an engine and put it all back together, and it was just, I was exhausted. But yeah, my classmates were really encouraging. We would have study groups. Um, and my professors, I still visit them every once in a while and say hey, or they'll come to Toyota sometimes and say hey to me. Um, yeah, so it was such a good experience, and I recommend it to so many people around here to go there.
That's fantastic. Do you mind sharing what program it is?
Yeah, it's just the automotive. I think they call it it's an associate's degree in automotive technology. I think they call it.
Okay.
Yeah, at Chemeketa Community College.
Okay. And that's in Oregon?
In Salem, Oregon, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. It's interesting you talk about the Zoom and the side benefits of it. I mean, obviously it's a challenge, right? Because you don't have the hands-on, and I think COVID was particularly challenging for people in hands-on careers, because you don't get that type of learning without the hands-on part of it. But there's also this piece of, like, COVID really forced us to be flexible and adaptable to things that, like, maybe we wouldn't have been before. And I think it had some, like, unintended benefits of we kind of learned to have some flexibility that showed us that there are ways that we can do things differently and accommodate people with various learning disabilities, or maybe people who need more flexibility with their time, whether it's for health reasons or for balancing family with work, heaven forbid, right? And so
Mhm,
there's kind
mhm.
of, it's an interesting thing that you bring that up, and I think that's a really important, like, I feel like our industry, the automotive industry, doesn't really like change all that much. And so the thought of like doing things differently terrifies folks in the industry. Um, but I think we need to, because more and more, both men and women are looking for more balance with their family and with their jobs, right?
Yeah, totally. I think it opened up like this whole new like world for people, especially with people who have families. They're able to work from home and like stay-at-home moms who can do that. And because right now it's just so hard to be have just a one income for your family. Like both people pretty much have to work unless you're gonna, I mean, yeah, it's almost impossible. So it's pretty cool how that like worked out.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of benefits from it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the school program was how long?
2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Mhm,
So you put off for a little bit while you had your second son, then started
mhm,
back up, went through that for
mhm.
2 years, and then have gone straight in. And then somewhere along the line, you've had a third son now, right? Who's a little
Yeah,
wee one right now.
yep,
So you've done having a kid pre-automotive career. You've had a kid in school or preschool and dealing with that during schooling, and then dealt with being pregnant and having a child while in the industry. So you've got some
mhm,
perspective on,
mhm.
on how this has gone. So talk to me about your experiences with balancing being pregnant, being a mom, dealing with all of the challenges. I know it can't be easy.
Yeah, I think the most challenging thing is when, because I have a son in kindergarten and a son in preschool. When I started Toyota, both of them were in daycare and they weren't quite in, like, school yet. But their first year in daycare, they just got sick with everything that you can think of. And when they're sick, they're not allowed to be there, or they bring it home and then we all get sick too. So that has gotten better, but that's always the challenge is that they're constantly bringing home the germs, and then we're balancing trying to figure out, okay, who's going to stay home with the kids and who's not going to get paid.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Mhm.
Now, what career is your husband in? Is he in a similar career?
No, he has before. He's been a loop tech before, but his he has a bachelor's in business management, but he works as a warehouse associate for Home Depot.
Okay. Is
Mhm.
time off as difficult for him in that job as it is in the trades? Or have you, or I guess I should pose that as like, who has a more challenging time taking time off of work?
Mhm. So it's not really a matter. Our both of our employers are really great about understanding, that we have kids and they get sick, like it just happens. They're really understanding of us going home when we need to. It's the money part that's difficult because we use up any PTO or any vacation time that we can to get paid before it's even halfway through the year, just so we can get paid. And then, the other half of the year, it's okay, well, we're going to go unpaid, whether it's me or my husband going home. And he makes more money than I do. So I'm usually the one to go home. And it, I put the pressure upon myself really because, like I said, my employer's very understanding. His wife is actually currently or was a kindergarten teacher. And so he understands that she was always getting sick and picking up the germs from the kids and stuff. So it's great to have that level of yeah, just understanding and support from an employer. So I put the pressure upon myself because I think, oh, I imagine what coworkers or my employers is thinking of me when it's probably not true. And even if it was true, who cares? Like, but it's hard to tell myself that.
Right. Right. It's one thing to say that, but telling your emotions that because I think for a
Mhm,
long time we did really look down on people for taking time off work, right?
mhm.
Um, do you feel like your coworkers are supportive, or do you feel like that has been an issue throughout your
I've
time?
had I've heard comments behind my back before, but it's only from a couple particular people that I just it doesn't bother me because there's so many other people that do support me. I've actually been out of work for the last 4 weeks. So I was out of work because I had my 3rd son last November,
Okay.
and I had 12 weeks where I could stay home with him. I
Oh,
returned to work,
was that
and
paid?
that was all paid, yes, that was through the
That's
state. Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
Oh, not through the dealership. That's through the state.
No, no, we did have a disability type of program, but it kind of like, it I guess, ended in January because we're picking up this new thing that the state provides. So I stayed home for 12 weeks with him. And when I returned to work, I actually had the flu and I worked with a mask, but it just got so bad. My fever got so bad and everything got so bad. I had to stay home for a few days. It turned into bronchitis
Oh, geez.
for 4 months. And because of the bronchitis, and all the coughing, I injured my ribs so badly. I dislocated
Oh my
3
gosh.
different ribs, 2 in my back and 1 from my sternum, and all
Oh
of
my
that
gosh.
caused some fractures in my what do you call it? Cartilage, my rib cartilage, and there what my acupuncturist called it is that I had stuck ribs. All of the muscles in between were so angry that my ribs were stuck, so anytime I tried to breathe, they weren't flexing the way they were supposed to. So
Mm.
I had all of that happen. So I've been out of work for that particular injury, the rib injury for the
Oh
last
my
4
goodness.
weeks, and I return
Good
tomorrow
Lord. Oh my
because I'm
gosh.
finally better. Yeah, it was a lot of pain, but um I wanted to go back to work so many times just power through it. I told myself, I can just power
Yeah.
through it, but I actually had a couple of coworkers tell me, "Take care of yourself, like, don't come back until you're ready because it's just gonna get worse."
Mhm.
And one of them actually told me, "Yeah, my mom had that injury and it took her this long to get better. Oh, yeah, my dad had that injury before and it took him this long to get better." And so it was really encouraging to hear, like, other people
Yeah.
understand, like, this is an actual real injury that's very painful and I shouldn't be doing any of that type of work. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was encouraging to hear, like, my coworkers be so understanding, and like I said, there's a couple that don't care for me or whatever, but there's so many other ones that support
Yeah.
me and encourage me, so yeah.
That is so cool to hear because I will say that is definitely not the environment when I was a
What
tech.
I've heard. Mhm,
At the dealership,
mhm,
it was definitely not supportive in that way. So the fact that you're not only have an employer who's so flexible and understanding, but also that you are in a state that is providing options
mhm,
for maternity leave, which is freaking amazing. I want to learn more
mhm,
about that immediately. But to hear that your coworkers are saying don't just power through because you'll hurt yourself more and are being that supportive, because I think for the longest time we really had to choose between
mhm,
career, health, family, that those things were all really mutually exclusive. And if you were sick, you just power through because that's what you
mhm.
do, because we only get 5 days off or whatever it is, right? um, which I think surprises a lot of people because in a lot of like corporate America, they get a little bit more time, more sick time than we do in the trades. But yeah, 5 days for your first what, 2 years? Is that still the norm?
At least for the company that I work for, I get 2 weeks.
Oh, very nice.
For if you've been working for the company for up to 2 years, you get, yeah, 2 weeks, and any more than that, it goes up. So I think after you've been there for more than 2 years, it goes up or something like that.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
and it depends, but that is sick time and vacation time. So
Right.
we don't have a sick time that's separate from that. So
Mm.
that's where all of my vacation time goes to, is if I have to go home because my kids are sick or because I'm sick. So
Yeah, absolutely.
mhm.
Because two weeks is really not a lot for a
No.
year at all. Um, Interesting. So you've been off now for a little bit. It's really exciting to hear that you're going back and that you're feeling better and that your team has been so supportive. Talk to me more about the struggle with being a mom, being a tech, balancing all of these things. What's been I mean, of course, getting sick and dealing with pay and all of that.
Mhm.
Do you feel like it's affected your career trajectory?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
what's been the biggest challenge?
I think, deciding what my priorities are has been really hard because, I have these kids and to I don't want them to think that that work is more important to me ever.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, so there's all of these certifications and studying that I could do so that I could progress more in my job instead of being a maintenance tech. I could be a certified tech right now, actually coming June if I wanted to. Even now because so actually my education counts as a year of experience. And with that, since I have a year under my belt with Toyota, that means I have 2 years of experience. And some of that is required for some of the Toyota certifications
mhm.
and for, getting further in your career. And so I could be there, right? I have some of my classmates are my coworkers right now, I have 2 of them. And one of them is already at that level. He's much further than I am. And he's younger, he doesn't have a family, but it shows like I see that and I have to remind myself that I'm in such a different place than he is. I have a
Yeah.
family that um I don't want these years when they're young, I don't want to look back and regret, any time that I spent studying over playing in the backyard with them, or the weekends studying and, you know, for tests or anything instead of taking them to the beach. Like, it's not so I guess that would be the way that it's affected me the most in how I've chosen to not progress in my career, and
Mm,
sometimes that can be hard because I while I'm working, I'm doing maintenance work. I'm doing oil changes, tire rotations, battery replacements, like, I'm not doing to me, it doesn't feel very significant, and even though it is in a different way, it doesn't feel very significant, and because I'm a girl, like, I want to be ahead, and I don't want to look like this little tiny girl who just can only do oil changes, but I try to remind myself that that's not what's important to me right now. It's important to me that I have a job, but the career part of it doesn't have to be now. It can be
yeah.
later.
I think that's a tough one for all parents. I think
Mhm,
particularly women, because I think the parenting tends to fall on women still much more than it
mhm,
does on men. But that I feel that tension for you between like wanting to learn and keep doing more. Like you talked earlier about loving learning, and like I can see that you want that, but having to suspend that and pause that. And I think as women, we talk about this work life balance, and I will always say that I feel like I hate that phrase. It is such an awful phrase because I feel like it is just one more thing that we as women get to feel like we have failed at accomplishing. Um, because I don't know that it is possible to have a work life balance. I don't know that
mhm.
you have to, like you said, kind of choose one takes priority over the other. And it kind of has to, like this myth that we can have it all. Like, yes, you
Yep.
can. However, there's sacrifices that happen.
Mhm,
There have to
mhm.
be. And
Yeah.
it's
I think
challenging.
I saw I don't know if it was a quote or something my friend said that, like, sometimes she feels very defeated in the day when she looks at the end of the day and she realizes that only one part of her life got all of her attention. Her
Mhm.
job couldn't get 100% of her attention. Her toddler couldn't get 100% of her attention. And whatever else, she's a wife as well. So it's like it's you have to pick and choose, and that can be so hard for women who just want to be everything for everybody.
Yeah. And we're made and we either put it on ourselves or it comes from the outside as well that like we have to be excellent at everything. That there is such a thing as being the best at all of the things simultaneously. And it's such
Mhm.
a setup for failure. Um that I struggle with. And I know so many women struggle with that, giving themselves permission. And I think
Mhm.
it's so refreshing to hear your attitude on this. Like, and I know I'm sure it's not always you're not always as resolute in this, but your perspective of I'm choosing something different right
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
and accepting that. Was it challenging for you coming to that place of acceptance? Has this been a journey, I
Yes.
assume?
Yep. You know what's funny is in like the first year of working at Toyota, I had a coworker who said, "Oh, I've been watching Grey's Anatomy again." And I thought, I've never seen that before. I should watch it. I was watching Grey's Anatomy, and that's where I kind of like when I don't know if you've seen it at all,
A
but
hundred
when
years ago, but yes.
yeah, so when the main character is like trying to decide between being like the most amazing surgeon and being a mother, I was like, man, I
Mm.
can really relate to this.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And you've done a couple of posts on social media kind of talking about that struggle,
Mhm.
which is how I originally kind of found you and reached out to you. Cause I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like this the struggle is real. And I know a lot of women really struggle with it. Do you do you feel like is it just a matter of individuals choosing and saying, "Right now, this is more important to me than this other thing," and just accepting that that is gonna mean that I don't have time to study and therefore advance in my career as much as I might be able to if I committed more time to it? Um, or is there a way? Could things change? Is there a way that the automotive industry, could be structured differently
That's
to
interesting perspective. Yeah, actually, I think that there could be so my job has actually done this before where our dispatch guy, he held a class and it was based on electrical, different electrical things because that's kind of what we're dealing with a lot right now is a lot of technicians aren't as educated in electrical diagnosis or
Mhm,
repair. And so he held a class actually with a handful of us and just taught us the basics. And it was actually a lot of what I had already learned in class. It was good and refreshing. But I think, and it wasn't even very long, it was just on an evening. But I think that could be something if they actually kept up with that, because that only happened a couple of times, and I don't know why it fizzled out. But if yeah, if there was some sort of way to like hold those classes, whether it's like a refresher for some of us who have already been to school, so it's good to remember some of the things we learned, or for some of my coworkers, they'd never learned that stuff ever before. And so it was like very refreshing for them. And so I think having that would really help with, and I think that was kind of their intention actually, is because a lot of us are behind on our ASEs, or some of us have never even taken any of them or Toyota certifications. And so to try and get all of us up to a higher level in education and certifications. That was, I think, their intention. Um, and I think it really helped.
mm.
After those two classes, I went and took my A6 ASE, which is the electrical one, and I failed it by 1 point.
Oh, man. That's
1
always
point. Oh, I was so mad about it. And so I haven't gone back. I will eventually.
Oh. You must. 1 is not bad, yeah. That's always the most painful when you miss by 1 point. I've
Of
been
course, I
there.
started with one of the hardest ones too. So,
Well, it's nice to see shops investing in education, and I
mhm,
think kind of where it might be going with that too is kind of like if we create learning opportunities and continuing education opportunities that are more flexible time-wise,
mhm,
um, that make it possible for people to do in the evenings, maybe, right? Like, let's go back to our COVID learnings, and we learned how to do teaching online, we learned how to do learning online, we learned how to do this kind of remote stuff. So can we as an industry tap into that to create learning opportunities that can be done after your kids go to sleep,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Or
hands-on
even like
skills
being
test?
recorded. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. Mhm.
exactly. So I think, if we can, as an industry, can become more creative, that maybe we don't have to choose. And this
Mm,
goes back to that kind of age old question too, that I hear people say is like, well, the industry shouldn't have to change because women want to be a part of it. And I guess I just want to like nip that in the bud, just
mm.
because I feel like men benefit from this too, right? Because men would also appreciate being able to be home for their kids while they're
Mhm,
awake, and then be able to do their learning after
mhm,
hours or after their kids are asleep, or would appreciate being able to take a long lunch to go to their kids' baseball game and then come back to work later. So, like, we talked about this on an episode a couple of weeks ago. The idea of like having more flexible work schedules and how that might help resolve the parenting question for both men and women, and that it
mm.
improves the industry for both men and women. I think things need to change. Like, I think it's a piece of both, right? Like, it's the individual choosing where their priority is, but like maybe we can change things as an industry to where we don't have to make that choice, because I think it is possible, just not in our current system.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that too because of what my employer implemented not too long ago. It was before I was pregnant, so it must have been over a year ago that we did any of that, but it was really helpful and I enjoyed it, and I think
Yeah.
yeah, I think that, when I go back, I'll ask about it too. I remember the dispatcher actually, he created this really cool board where he
Mm.
put bolts and switches and wires, and so that you could like physically move things around and see what happens with the electricity as you're
Yeah.
moving things around instead of like all of these hypothetical ohms and resistance and seeing it in person, I think was like his intention, but we never got around to that unless it happened while I was gone, I guess, maybe. So, yeah, I'll have to ask about that.
Yeah, worth looking. Maybe stoke the fire and get them to start
Yeah.
those up again. There's definitely value in that. So,
Mhm.
how long did you work into your pregnancy? How long were you on the line while you were
So,
pregnant?
at first I worked for, let's see, probably a month or so, and then I got extremely sick with
Mm.
what's called hyperemesis, where you can't even keep water down most of the time.
Oh, geez.
And yeah, so I lost a lot of weight and I had to go get IV infusions twice a week so that I didn't get too dehydrated.
Mm.
And I was just I was just in bed all the time. For that was for 3.5 months, just in bed all the time and then getting the infusions. And then I returned to work, and so I was gone from about May to July.
Wow.
And then I returned last July. I worked until late September, early October, because it was right before Halloween. I remember that. So I don't know
Okay.
what is July, August. Yeah, I think I was around 6 months pregnant. Yeah,
Okay.
but it
What was
wasn't
that
actually working the
like?
full 6 months. But I was still 6 months pregnant when I was
Right.
working.
I know. I was like, don't undervalue that. I mean, don't undersell that. That's like working
Yeah,
6 months pregnant, specifically on cars, is no small feat.
yeah. I didn't realize how difficult it was until I wasn't pregnant anymore, and I went back and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I forgot, like, whew, that was difficult. Like, racking carbs with big old belly in your way is just hard.
I give you a lot of credit. I have never been pregnant. I can only imagine how challenging that must be. But
Mhm,
my goodness, how were your team members? I mean, it sounds like you work at an incredible shop where people are super supportive. But
mhm.
were they cool with you being there, pregnant, and 6 months, or
Yeah,
were they like rushing to help you? Like, how did that work?
so it was nice. There was never anybody that was rushing to help me or because they knew I was very capable, but and they also knew, like, they reminded me a lot, if you ever need help, just ask, like, don't worry about it. So, and my employer or my supervisor as well said, if you ever need help, just ask somebody. Don't be afraid. Like, we all know that, this is not something that there's things that you shouldn't be doing or whatever. So I was actually in a stall right next to somebody who would do all of the rotates for me, because that's not something I could do with a big belly in my way.
Yeah.
Most of the time I was resting a tire on my belly, and it was just not safe. So, and then he would flag
I just
those
got
out.
a visual of that.
I know, right?
Like,
Nope.
not a good idea, no.
Nope. Yeah, so he would flag the hours for the rotate, but I mean, I say all he would have to do, but he wouldn't have to rack the car, and I actually would zip off the lug nuts for him, and he would just rotate it and then make sure they were torqued when I lowered the car. So he got, a couple tenths out of it, and then I had to help, so that way I wasn't limited. I couldn't, there were a lot of cars where pretty much any car that had a maintenance request on it had a rotate, and it's like I couldn't pass up every single rotate. So
Right.
it really helped me be able to, get cars through and done quick without, yeah. So
You
it was
found your
great to have
workaround.
that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think people forget about that a lot, right? And it's not just when you're pregnant either. It's like it's just some people are better at some things than other things,
Yep.
right? Like, I know that I'm not the strongest when it comes to my arms, but I know I'm flexible and I'm little. So, like, I don't mind sharing and trading jobs with people and be like, hey, I'll let you flag this, job that requires lots of big muscle, and I'll take that other job for you. And like, why
Mhm.
not let us,
Work together.
work together? Like,
Mhm.
we don't all have to be strong at the same thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
what a concept.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of that with like marker bulbs and stuff, because my hands are smaller and I can get in there easier.
Yeah.
Since I've been gone for the last 4 weeks, one of my coworkers sent me a video and said, "This is the fifth tech to try and get this marker bulb out. We need you back." And I thought that was so funny.
I love it. I love it. I feel like, for better or worse, like the challenges of being a woman, the challenges of being a pregnant woman or a mom in the automotive industry, like the challenges are not like unique challenges. They're challenges of the whole industry, and like they just bring them to light. And the
Mhm.
solutions for being a mom, or the challenge of being a mom while being a technician, the solutions for that are the same as the solutions for making it a better work environment for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, it just brings it to light, right? Like, it's okay for us to have different strengths. It's okay for us to lean on each other for different things and
Mhm.
trade skills back and forth, and maybe be more flexible with the hours that we work or when we do our education. Like, all of those things I think are positive things that would make it so much easier to be a parent. Take mom, dad out of it, just be a parent. Or even, let's take that out of it, to be a human being in this industry, right?
Mhm.
Maybe one day. Maybe one
Yeah.
day we'll get there. But it does sound like you have a phenomenal shop that you're at. Do
Mhm.
you
Yeah, it's
feel
taken a lot of time and a lot of yeah, it didn't start that way necessarily. I
okay?
started as a lube tech. I'm in the main shop now, but I started as a lube tech. It was a lot more
Okay.
fast paced, and like I didn't enjoy not just the fast pace, but also who I worked with was just not my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't the vibe I was going for. I guess like it wasn't a lot of younger kids, and just nothing against younger kids, but I couldn't relate to any of the conversations that were happening, or just the work ethic was just very different. And so moving into the main shop definitely helped, but even then I still had to I don't know what you would call it, just um, make myself known as a hard worker, and that I wasn't there for attention or for anything like that. I was just there to work. I wasn't there necessarily to even make friends. If you don't want to be my friend, that's fine. Like, I'm just there to work. But there have been a lot of my coworkers that I've made friends with, and it's been really great. One of them, um, excuse me, one of them today already messaged me and said, we're excited to have you back tomorrow. So yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. How long do you feel like it took you to kind of establish your space in the shop and gain the
Mm-hmm.
respect of your peers?
I think it kind of comes and goes kind of as like, I think that it probably took a good 6 months, which really maybe even less than that. It didn't take too long because I was already, when I was a lube tech, I was going into the main shop and asking questions. And I was helping people when I could, if I had the time. And like if people were doing, brake fluid type of exchanges, or not even just exchanges, but if they needed somebody to pump the brakes so that way they could get some air out of the system or
Mhm.
something, I would be that person up there. Sometimes you need a second person. And since I was hourly, it's like, well, may as well help them out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it took me probably 6 months, maybe a little bit less, but I feel like every once in a while I kind of get like a weird vibe, whether it's because I'm gone because I was pregnant, or because, I don't have to do the hard work because I was pregnant, or, I don't have to work on the big trucks and tundras and sequoias. I don't have to do the annoying skid plates and all that because they're bigger vehicles. And so I kind of get the vibe that they're like, oh, she's just trying to get out of the hard work. And
Mhm.
so it kind of is like, sometimes I get that vibe, but overall I feel like I've established like my place in the shop, and overall people respect me. Yeah,
Yeah. The people who matter, right?
exactly.
And I want to talk real quick about that transition from being out in the lube tech position out in the lube shop to being in the main shop, because I think that's someplace like a lot of folks, they get out of trade school and they being on the loop line is kind of where they get put right away and then often get
Mhm.
stuck there. So I'm glad you brought up that point of like how you kind of had already created inroads in the main shop, but how did you get yourself out of the lube rack and the lube shop? Because people do, they feel like they get stuck there, and you were already struggling with balancing work
Mhm.
life. um,
Mhm.
How'd you get yourself out?
It was, yeah, I know. It was really hard for me because instead of proving it with, because they look at numbers, like how many hours you're flagging in the day. They look at attendance, and they look at like how long you're taking your lunch, all of those things, as well as like if you have education. And so I had the education, and I took 30-minute lunches, sometimes an hour, but that's reasonable as long as you don't take breaks the rest of the day. The two that made it really difficult was flagging hours, because the type of rack that I had was suitable for trucks, and I was placed on that rack for some reason. And so I was always working on trucks, which take longer whenever you have to take the skid plate off, or the tires are bigger, whatever. We do work in pairs at Toyota, which does make it faster, but as a lube tech, you work in pairs.
Okay. Not in the
You
main
may
shop?
have experience. No, not in the main shop, just as a
Okay.
lube tech. They call it
Okay.
express lube tech or whatever. Yeah. And
Okay.
so you have a partner you're working with constantly. That makes it a lot faster, but still, even everybody has a partner. So, like, obviously, the people who are always getting Camrys and Ravs are going to be so much faster than the ones that have. Yeah. So that made it really difficult for me, was trying to prove that I'm flagging a decent amount of hours, because I never was. We had to split it between our partner, as well as if we're on a truck, it's just going to take longer. So I tried my best to upsell bulbs and anything else that cars needed, but some of it was like stuff we couldn't do. We couldn't do diff services or anything like that. So, anyways, that made it really difficult to move up faster than I wanted to. And so one of my classmates who got hired on after me actually got moved into the main shop way sooner than me. And it actually didn't cause any kind of conflict or anything like that, because we have such a good friendship. And I
Awesome.
was really excited for him. It was more like I put this, I guess, pressure on myself. And I was disappointed in myself, not in the management and their decision. It was more like man, I really could have, like I could have done more, or, my attendance sucked because that was the first year that my kids went to daycare because we were both working. So yeah, I guess I could have gone in a lot faster, but yeah, because of all of that, it did take longer. And I think it was just me pushing, reminding my boss, this is where I want to be. This is why I went to school. This is why I spent 2 years studying all of this. And so he knew I wanted to be in there. And it was just a matter of making the room because every stall is full of a tech right now, all the
Oh,
time.
okay. So
Yep.
part
And
of it
so,
is there has to be a space for you to move into.
yep. Yep.
Okay.
So it's whether somebody's quitting or getting fired or whatever, there's always somebody in a stall. Hmm.
So it's waiting for the opportunity, the opening to come up, but in the meantime, continuing to put yourself out there and
Yep.
remind them that you want it so you're first in line
Yep.
while
Exactly.
balancing everything else out too, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Well, good. I love it. Those are useful tips. Okay. Oh
Hmm.
my goodness. I just looked at the time. See, this is what happens. See, I told you this was going to happen. We're just going to be talking, and then I'm going to look at the time and be like, "Holy crap! Where did the hour go?" Um, so we only have 4 minutes left, guys. I Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet? Anything important points that you wanted to touch on that we have not gotten to yet?
Mm, I think so. I have talked like very positively about my job, which is true. All of it's true.
That's so
But
awesome to
there
hear.
have been, yeah, there have been difficult times, of course, times where I have come back to work after being pregnant and my stall has been changed without me being told, or, like just things that, and that's not to speak badly about the company. That's just speaking about how it affected me and how I like coming back from, a disability type of leave and already being kind of like a little bit defeated to be even more defeated. I feel like that was really hard, but like getting through it, I remember going to work and like noticing all of my tools were in a different stall, and not only a different stall, but the rack was specifically for trucks. And
Mm,
so just like having to advocate for myself was really difficult for me. I'm not that type of person usually. And so I had to advocate for myself. Like I was pregnant and there's no way I could be working on trucks, and to use that particular rack you had to push the car in neutral to line it up with those arms because they're so long and heavy. And I think that would be, yeah, that's something that I think is important to just remember in any job. And especially for women, it can be hard for us. I mean, there are women out there that are like, like they're so good at advocating for themselves, but I feel like I know a lot of us that are just we struggle with it, and I really had a
yeah.
hard time with just reminding people that like, yeah, like my health and everything matters. And so yeah, there have been multiple instances of that, and I think it's just because they don't have as much experience with women in this industry, so it doesn't
Right.
really like cross their mind that these things need to even be considered. And
Right.
so I don't, yeah, I like I said, I don't speak badly about them. I think it's because once it's brought up to them, it's handled well. And so I think that would be my encouragement is like, don't think that it's them, like trying to, I guess, push you out or be aggressive in any way. I think they just aren't aware, or they need to,
Yes.
yeah, they need to have that, yeah, be told to them or whatever it is. And yeah, it can be
Okay.
very hard to advocate for yourself. But in those instances when you feel like you're just at it alone or whatever, like just remember that it's not always like that. Usually it just
Yeah.
needs just communication. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think you are absolutely correct. I mean, obviously, yes, there are places where it is intentional. where it
Yeah.
is blatant
Mhm.
sexism or it's trying to push people out. That does happen for sure. But I think to your point, like 100%, often it's like it doesn't occur to them. Like they
Mhm.
just didn't even think about it. And because they're not parents or because they're not women or because they've not had that experience in the shop yet. I remember working with an independent shop who said, we don't understand why we can't attract female technicians. And within like 2 minutes of looking around their shop, I'm like, you don't even have a lock on your bathroom door. Why is a woman going to want to work here? And you have the men washing their hands in a mop sink. Like, this isn't a place that people want to work, period, let alone women. You don't have a lock on the bathroom door. And they're like, oh, we didn't even think about that. I'm like, right? Like,
Yeah,
it doesn't occur to them. If they keep doing it once it's been brought to their attention, that's a different story.
that's different. Yep.
But
Mhm.
so much is just not even occurring to them. And I think that's so important when you said about advocating for yourself, as hard as
Mhm.
it is, speaking up for yourself and offering the suggestion of the solution, right? Like, if
Yep.
I'm not capable of doing this thing, let me show you what I am capable of doing and where I'm still of value and how we can make this work as a win-win for everybody, because there's always a workaround, right? There's always a way around it.
Yep.
Okay, in our last couple of minutes, we're going a little over an hour here. I apologize. I know you want to get off to your kids, so don't want to keep you longer than I have to. But final question: if you had the opportunity to go back to little baby you, younger Des, or another little girl out there like you wants to do what you're doing, sees what you're doing, and says, "I want that." What are your words of advice to her, aside from advocating for yourself, which is definitely a plus?
I would say just do it. That's literally what happened to me is I went to a friend of mine that said I told them, like, "I've always wanted to work on my own car." And she had a RX-7 and she was like, "Do you know what a rotary is?" I was like, "I have no idea." And she's like, "Well, let me tell you about it." And it just I told her, like, "I really wanna work on my own car." And she said, "Well, just do it." Like, "How though?" And she's like, "Oh, YouTube, there's forums, like, we can help you." So it's like it's just about meeting the right people, but even if you don't know the right people, just go to school or
Yeah.
YouTube or just message me. Like, I don't know, I'll help you. Like, it's just about meeting
Oh,
the right people. Yeah.
I love that. So people can reach out to you on social media now that you've opened
Of
that
course.
up.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
love being able to encourage people and answer questions.
Very cool. All right, I'm
Mhm.
going to make sure all of the links to get to Des are down in the description below. So reach out to her, take her up on that offer. And along those lines, there's so many women in the trades and men in the trades who are so happy to share their knowledge and their information. So like, just reach out to people. They're
Mhm.
generally really happy to share if you're authentic in your wanting to learn. So that's awesome. Fantastic advice. Des, thank you so very much for agreeing to be on. This was a great conversation. I love your perspective on things. And I know that when the time is right, your career is going to take off because you're going to be able to give it the energy that you've given everything else in your life that you've excelled at. And right now, priorities are different, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I love the peace that you have about that. I know it's not always an easy thing to have, but I applaud it. And your attitude is really refreshing. So I wish you all of the best. Thank you so very much for hanging out with us for this last
Thank you
hour,
so
and
much.
let you go back to your kids. And folks at home, thank you guys so very much for hanging out with us this evening. I hope you enjoyed meeting Des as much as I did. Make sure you go check her out, follow along on her journey. Her social media has some pictures of her adorable children, and they're very, very cute. But reach out to her, take her up on her offer. Big thank you again to our sponsor for tonight's episode, Drive Time, for putting their money where their mouth is in supporting women in the trades, both in their regular life as well as behind the scenes, by supporting this podcast and so many other ways in which they help support women in the trades. So big thank you to them. Make sure you go check them out. And of course, thank you to you guys for being awesome and being part of normalizing women in the trades, shining a light on these incredible women, celebrating them, hearing their stories, and passing them along. So if you liked this, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you share this with folks who need to see it. Hit like, hit subscribe. Let us know if there's somebody else that we should chat with or a topic that we should have on as a focus topic. And until next time, make sure you come back next Monday for an archive episode and next Wednesday for another fantastic live episode. And until then, be good to yourselves, Be good to one another. Be good human beings. And we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.